In the vast expanse of the galaxy, civilizations older than human history itself had seen countless species rise and fall. The peaceful, harmonious societies of the Galactic Union prided themselves on their wisdom, their age-old treaties, and their careful balance. Each species, from the graceful and ethereal Ardelni to the stoic, militaristic Drathka, had mastered the art of coexistence. It had taken eons of trial and error to create a system that worked, and the Union believed it was the key to lasting peace. But then humans arrived. At first, they were a curiosity. Their rapid expansion into space was both impressive and reckless. Their technology, still in its infancy compared to the ancient races, was primitive, yet showed remarkable potential. They could build vast cities, terraform inhospitable worlds, and communicate across the stars in mere moments. To some, it seemed like they were destined for greatness. To others, it felt like the galaxy was witnessing the birth of another reckless species that would soon crumble under its own arrogance. Still, the other species viewed the humans with mild amusement. After all, humanity was young, brash, and prone to bursts of unpredictability. Their tendency to make decisions based on emotion rather than logic, their chaotic politics, and their reckless expansionist tendencies made them seem like just another species to watch. The Union had dealt with many before. They tamed them, guided them, and helped them integrate into the larger galactic community. Just another step in the long march of history. But there was one thing the galaxy hadn't counted on: humanity's defiance. While other species approached the Union with respect, diplomacy, and patience, humans had always demanded one thing: respect. And in a voice that echoed from every corner of their vast, diverse world, they made it clear: please don't make us angry. It wasn't a warning, at least not to anyone else. To the humans, it was a plea, a reminder to themselves, perhaps, that they had yet to be tested, yet to be pushed too far. But to the galactic powers, it was nothing more than a curious quirk, one of many that made humans, well, human. The humans' message was shrugged off. They were still a fledgling species, struggling to understand the complex ways of the galaxy. The Varnak, a proud and ancient race, had already started testing humanity's resolve. They saw Earth as a small, inconsequential planet, and its people as easily manipulated, just another race to dominate. But humanity's reaction to their first real challenge would change everything. As the Varnak ships appeared on the horizon, preparing to claim human space, they had no idea that their assumption about humanity would be their first and final mistake. The Varnak had no time for diplomacy. Their warships, sleek and imposing, cut through the void of space toward the human colony of Erythrea, a remote world rich in resources. The Varnak saw the humans as a nuisance at best, a race to be subjugated at worst. They'd watched them closely, cataloging their rapid technological development, and decided it was time to put them to the test. It was a straightforward plan: land, claim the planet as their own, and crush any resistance. After all, they had faced countless species far older and more advanced than humanity with ease. For the Varnak, it was just another conquest. The humans, however, were not so easily subdued. On Erythrea, Governor Alina Trevors had long warned the Galactic Union that humanity would never bend quietly to anyone. She had read the reports of the Varnak's approaching fleet with a calm that only years of military training could cultivate. She knew what was at stake and had already started organizing the planet's defenses. The colony wasn't a massive military stronghold, but humans had something no one else could replicate: the will to fight and the instinct to protect. When the Varnak's massive ships descended from the sky, their first salvo of weaponized plasma storms lit up the atmosphere. The Varnak expected the humans to flee, to cower behind their fragile walls. What they didn't expect was the immediate coordinated counterattack. The human fleet, though small in comparison, came alive with a viciousness that stunned the Varnak. The ships, old and seemingly obsolete, performed maneuvers that defied the Varnak's expectations. Humans didn't have the advanced stealth technology of other species or the brute force of others, but they made up for it with improvisation. Human ships engaged in erratic flight patterns that threw off the Varnak's targeting systems. Old fighters, once destined for scrap, launched surprise ambushes, their pilots operating with a level of creativity and instinct that was almost alien to the Varnak. On the ground, the humans fought with relentless resolve. The Varnak had expected planetary defenses to be minimal at best. Instead, human militia forces led guerrilla raids, drawing on decades of resourcefulness. They used terrain to their advantage, setting traps and ambushing Varnak soldiers in the dense forests and rocky canyons of the planet. The Varnak, used to overwhelming their foes with superior firepower, found themselves constantly thwarted by the humans' unpredictability and determination. In the span of only 3 days, the Varnak had lost hundreds of soldiers and ships, their superiority crumbling under the weight of human resistance. Governor Travers didn't stop there. She broadcasted a message across the galaxy, one that would reach every corner of space. To the Varnak, and to anyone else who might listen, humanity will never back down. Please, don't make us angry. For the first time, the galaxy took notice. The Varnak, stunned and humiliated, retreated in disarray, leaving behind a shattered fleet. The message was clear. Humanity was not to be underestimated. The victory on Erythrea sent shockwaves through the galaxy. No one had expected the humans to put up such a fierce fight. The Galactic Union had assumed that, like every other species before them, humanity would buckle under the weight of a superior force. Instead, they had defied all expectations. News of the battle reached the farthest reaches of the galaxy, and a new question began to form in the minds of the galaxy's leaders. What else could humans do? For the Varnak, the defeat was a bitter pill to swallow. Their pride, their very identity as the dominant species in this region of space, had been shattered. Their losses on Erythrea were unacceptable, and they vowed retribution. But they underestimated something crucial: the nature of humanity's resilience. The Varnak had thought they were merely fighting a weaker, younger race. What they had failed to see was that humanity's greatest weapon was its unwillingness to surrender, no matter the cost. Despite the victory, humanity wasn't content to rest. They had learned something important from the conflict. Their sheer determination was not enough to keep them safe. The galaxy wasn't going to just roll over and accept their existence. Humanity needed to prepare for what was coming next. Governor Travers, who had risen to prominence after the battle, recognized this. She called for an emergency summit of human leaders and strategists, a council that would form the backbone of humanity's defense. In the shadow of the Varnak retreat, new alliances began to form. The humans were an enigma, unpredictable, and fiercely protective of their own. The more cautious species in the galaxy began to watch them closely, unsure whether to offer friendship or fear them. But one thing was undeniable: humanity had earned their respect. Some, like the peaceful Elvery, proposed diplomatic solutions, offering trade routes and technologies in exchange for mutual protection. Others, like the war-hardened Drathka, saw in humanity a potential military ally, one who could tip the balance of power in their favor. Yet, it was the Zorcha, a race known for their cunning and manipulation, who saw humanity's strength differently. They realized that the real threat posed by humans was not their military power, but their ability to adapt. The Zorcha had been watching, calculating, and waiting for the right moment to strike. Unlike the Varnak, they weren't interested in defeating humanity directly. They were interested in understanding how far they could push them. What would it take to break the human spirit? They were about to find out. In the midst of this uneasy peace, the first signs of a new conflict began to emerge. The Zorcha began to orchestrate a series of smaller skirmishes in human space, testing the boundaries of humanity's resolve. And this time, they would not make the mistake of underestimating their adversary. Humans were no longer just survivors. They were becoming a force to be reckoned with. And the galaxy was starting to realize that, perhaps too late, they had already made one very grave mistake. They had underestimated what humans were capable of when pushed. As tension simmered, the true danger lurking in the shadows began to reveal itself. The Zorcha, with their intricate webs of manipulation, had carefully planted seeds of discord across human colonies. Unlike the Varnak, who had relied on brute force, the Zorcha worked through subtlety, spreading misinformation, inciting distrust, and creating division among humanity's allies. They knew that humanity's strength lay in unity, and they aimed to fracture that unity before the humans could truly become a unified power. At the same time, some of the more established powers in the galaxy grew wary of the humans' growing influence. The peaceful Elvery, who had once seen humanity as a potential partner, now feared that humans would dominate the galaxy if they continued on their current trajectory. The Drathka, with their calculated coldness, saw a new potential ally in humanity, but they too understood that the balance of power in the galaxy was delicate. They couldn't afford for humanity to grow uncontested. Slowly, a quiet coalition began to form, a group of species, including the Elvery and Drathka, that secretly began plotting ways to curb humanity's rise, all while publicly maintaining diplomatic relations. Humanity, however, was not so easily duped. Governor Trevors, now one of the central figures in human leadership, had become increasingly suspicious of the galaxy's reluctance to accept their presence. The Varnak were no longer a concern, but the quiet whispers of diplomacy behind closed doors didn't sit right with her. After a series of covert incidents, strange disruptions in communication systems, unexplained sabotages in human colonies, Trevors ordered a covert investigation into the political machinations of the galaxy. The results were shocking. The Elvery, Drathka, and several other species were involved in a secret alliance, orchestrating a campaign of destabilization. They feared the humans' power and sought to undermine them before they could become too influential. The realization hit like a wave. The galaxy wasn't just testing humanity, it was afraid of humanity. They had seen the humans' capacity for destruction, and more importantly, their capacity for adaptation. The galaxy's ancient powers were trying to suppress humanity's rise, believing that if they could keep them divided and distracted, they could avoid the inevitable upheaval that would come with humanity's dominance. But they underestimated the very thing they feared: the humans' ability to adapt and fight back when they were cornered. In the quiet of her command center, Governor Trevors looked out at the stars, her mind racing. The humans had been manipulated by the Varnak, by the Zorcha, and by the very species that had claimed to be their allies. Now, humanity had a choice: remain passive and submit to the whims of the galaxy's established powers, or rise up and fight for their place in the stars. And humanity, she knew, would never back down from a fight. The stage was set. The galaxy's hidden agenda was about to be exposed, and the cost of underestimating humanity would soon be painfully clear. The realization that they had been manipulated sent a wave of anger through the human ranks. Governor Trevors, once a beacon of diplomacy, now stood at the head of a rising tide of defiance. The humans were done playing by the galaxy's rules. They were no longer simply trying to survive or fit in. They were preparing to reshape the future of the galaxy. The quiet destabilization campaign aimed at fracturing human unity had instead forged it into something stronger. The revelation of the Galactic alliance against them acted as a catalyst, pushing humanity toward an inevitable confrontation. But the forces working against them were not idle. The Zorcha, who had long plotted in the shadows, saw their opportunity. Their true plan had always been to provoke humanity into a war that would throw the galaxy into chaos, giving them an opening to take control. They had studied human behavior closely, and now, as the galaxy's powers began to rally against the humans, the Zorcha made their move. They launched a direct assault on Earth. The Zorcha's fleet was unlike anything humanity had faced before. Sleek, stealthy ships with technology far beyond anything humans had developed. Their weapons were capable of ripping through planets, destabilizing entire ecosystems in a matter of hours. But the most terrifying weapon of all was something more insidious, a mind-altering device capable of turning entire populations into puppet armies. Earth was their primary target, and their plan was simple: break humanity's spirit by annihilating their homeworld and controlling the survivors. The attack came without warning. Zorcha ships cloaked in deep space breach Earth's atmosphere, their weapons striking major cities, devastating military installations, and creating chaos. For the first time in human history, Earth itself was under direct siege, and the Zorcha believed they had calculated everything perfectly. What they failed to account for was humanity's capacity to adapt and fight back when everything was on the line. Earth, despite its vulnerability, had something the Zorcha had underestimated: the unbreakable will of its people. Governor Travers immediately called upon humanity's vast resources: every fleet, every defense system, every scrap of technological ingenuity. But this wasn't just about technology anymore. The humans had been pushed too far. Their homes, their families, their very identity was at stake. What the galaxy didn't realize was that humanity's anger wasn't just about revenge. It was a primal force, a rallying cry that brought together not just Earth, but every human colony across the stars. In the chaos, a plan began to take shape, one that would use the Zorcha's own tactics against them. Humans had always been known for their creativity. And now, in the face of annihilation, that creativity would become their greatest weapon. They turned to the one thing the Zorcha hadn't considered: human unity in the face of shared tragedy. Within hours, humans began to strike back with ferocity, adapting Zorcha technology to their own ships, countering the mind control devices with a new experimental neural disruptor. The tide of battle shifted, slowly but surely. The Zorcha had made one crucial error. They had misjudged the depths of humanity's resolve. They had underestimated the cost of making humans truly angry. The battle for Earth was like nothing the galaxy had ever witnessed. The Zorcha, once confident in their superiority, were now scrambling. Humans, under Governor Travers' leadership, had thrown every ounce of their ingenuity and will into the fight. Every ship, every soldier, every colony rallied to the cause. The Zorcha, for the first time, were forced to contend with an enemy they couldn't predict, one that fought not just with weapons, but with an unyielding resolve. As the days dragged on, the Zorcha realized they had miscalculated. Despite their technological advantage, they were losing ground. Humans were using their own technology against them, adapting at an unprecedented rate. The neural disruptors were particularly effective, rendering the mind control devices useless. Human forces began to breach Zorcha ships, reclaiming their cities and staging daring counterattacks. Earth's skies were a chaotic canvas of flashing lights as Zorcha vessels fell to human ingenuity and sheer determination. But with every victory came a price. The human losses were staggering. Whole cities had been wiped out, entire regions were left in ruins, and the human cost in lives was unfathomable. Yet, even in the face of such devastation, humans refused to yield. There was no retreat, no plea for mercy. Earth itself seemed to burn with the fury of its people. The galaxy, which had once viewed humanity with a mixture of amusement and wariness, now watched in stunned silence as the human spirit proved to be more dangerous than any weapon. Governor Travers, standing amidst the wreckage of her own capital, felt the weight of leadership. She knew that the Zorcha wouldn't stop until they had completely eradicated humanity. But she also knew something that the galaxy hadn't realized. Humans weren't just fighting to survive. They were fighting to protect everything they had built, everything they believed in. The Zorcha were playing a dangerous game, but they didn't understand that humanity's greatest strength lay not in its technology, but in its collective will. In the midst of the conflict, the rest of the galaxy began to stir. Some species, like the Elvery, began to regret their earlier stance, seeing the full scope of humanity's power. Others, like the Drathka, recognized an opportunity. Humanity was no longer just a nuisance. It was a rising force that could shift the balance of power in the galaxy. The question was no longer whether humanity could survive, but whether the rest of the galaxy could coexist with a species so capable of reshaping the future. And yet, for all the destruction the Zorcha had caused, the true cost of this war had yet to be realized. The peace that had once reigned over the galaxy was now shattered, and the consequences of underestimating humanity were beginning to ripple outward. The galaxy would never be the same again, and the price of power would be paid by all. Humanity had become a force to be reckoned with, and the galaxy would soon learn that there was a steep cost to provoking them. The final moments of the battle for Earth were nothing short of legendary. The Zorcha, with their superior technology and calculated tactics, had never faced an adversary like humanity. Each Zorcha vessel that fell to human ingenuity and stubbornness sent shockwaves across the galaxy, and the words "Don't make us angry" echoed louder than ever before. Yet, despite the mounting victories, the war was far from over. Earth, while holding its ground, had become a scared, bleeding world, and the Zorcha were far from finished. The humans, though battered, had made a crucial breakthrough. A method to counter the Zorcha's cloaking technology and disrupt their communications networks. It was a last-ditch effort, a gamble that could turn the tide of the war. With the neural disruptors neutralizing their control devices and their military forces pushing back, the humans launched a full assault on the Zorcha flagship, the Nervoth, a gargantuan vessel capable of erasing entire moons with its weaponry. Governor Travers stood at the helm of humanity's final counteroffensive, knowing that the fate of Earth and every human colony hinged on this single moment. As the Nervoth loomed in the sky, its weapon systems powering up for the final strike, Travers issued the order to engage. The human fleet, now a cohesive, battle-hardened force, rushed to meet their enemy with unyielding resolve. The battle was brutal. Zorcha ships were masters of stealth and subterfuge, but humanity had learned their tactics and turned them against them. With precision and defiance, human fighters broke through enemy lines, engaging in close-quarters dogfights, weaving through plasma fire and debris. They had become a terror that even the Zorcha couldn't outmatch, improvising, adapting, and striking with the force of a unified will. In the heart of the flagship, Governor Travers and her command crew infiltrated the command center, risking everything to deliver a crippling blow to the Zorcha's core systems. The Zorcha, for all their superiority, had underestimated the ferocity of humanity's resolve and the tenacity of their fight for survival. And when they finally reached the heart of the Nervoth, they unleashed their final weapon, the last of humanity's unspent rage. The blast that followed was not just a physical weapon. It was a statement, a declaration of what had been forged in the crucible of war. The Nervoth exploded in a spectacular eruption, its once pristine design torn asunder by human will. The Zorcha flagship, the symbol of their dominion, was no more. In the aftermath of the battle, the galaxy watched in stunned silence. The once mighty Zorcha were forced to retreat, their empire on the brink of collapse. Humanity, battered and scarred, stood victorious. But at a tremendous cost. Earth was no longer the planet it had once been, and the scars of war would remain for generations. But the message was clear. The galaxy had learned the hard way that there were consequences to underestimating humanity. The words that had once been dismissed as a joke, as a plea, now resonated across the stars. Please don't make us angry. And as humanity rebuilt, the galaxy would never forget the price of that anger. The reckoning had only just begun. The smoke of battle still lingered in the void, and the stars seemed somehow dimmer in the aftermath. The Zorcha, once the pinnacle of technological mastery, were now scattered and fractured. Their empire, shattered by a force they had underestimated, crumbled in the face of humanity's relentless will. Earth, though scared beyond recognition, had survived. And in the ruins of war, something new was being forged. A new order, one where humanity was no longer the underdog, but a formidable force that commanded the galaxy's attention. Governor Travers, standing at the front of the shattered Earth government, surveyed the damage. She had led humanity through the greatest trial in their history, and though the victory had been hard-earned, it had given them something no one had anticipated: respect. But more importantly, it had given humanity a place in the Galactic Council, a voice that could no longer be ignored. The Galactic Union, shaken to its core by the events of the past few weeks, began to reconsider its stance. For centuries, the various species of the galaxy had been governed by a careful balance of power, and any disruption to that balance was seen as dangerous. But humanity had shown that it would not sit quietly under the oppressive rule of others. The Union now faced an uncomfortable truth. Humans had proven themselves to be both unpredictable and powerful, and neither could be ignored. As representatives from all corners of the galaxy convened to discuss the future, the mood was tense. Some were eager to extend olive branches, recognizing humanity's bravery and resilience. Others, still shaken by the scale of the conflict, were less certain. The Drathka, the Elveri, and even the once dominant Varnak now found themselves cautiously observing humanity, uncertain whether to embrace them as allies or prepare for the possibility of another confrontation. Humanity, however, was not concerned with the uncertainty of the galaxy. They had learned one irrefutable truth: their greatest asset was not their technology, their weapons, or their fleets. It was their unity. The human resolve, forged in the fires of their struggle, had become a beacon for others to follow. They didn't need the approval of the Galactic Union. They had earned their place, and they would defend it. Governor Travers addressed the assembly, her voice steady, but filled with the weight of all that had been fought for. "We will not ask for permission," she said, her words resonating through the chamber. "We will no longer be dismissed as a passing curiosity. We are not just survivors. We are a force to be reckoned with, and we will never forget what it took to get here." The galaxy, for the first time, understood the true meaning of the human morning. They had pushed humanity to the edge, and in doing so, had unlocked something powerful, something beyond their comprehension. The galaxy would never be the same. Humanity had entered the fold, not as a weak, fledgling species, but as a rising power. And the galaxy would learn, in time, that it would never again take humanity's plea for peace as a mere suggestion. Asterisk, asterisk, please, don't make us angry, asterisk, asterisk, had become a universal truth, and the universe had learned it too late.